Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was left behind by everyone. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The raid was supposed to be the end of it. It was supposed to be the surgical strike that severed the head of the snake before the body could thrash. The intelligence had come from Hawks, cross-referenced with data scraped from a captured PLF lieutenant. The location: a decommissioned geothermal research station buried deep within the jagged, pine-choked spine of the Niigata Mountains. The target: Kudai-Garaki's secondary laboratory, a hive suspected of housing the next generation of Hyanoma. It was 0300 hours. The air was thin, biting with the chill of late autumn, and heavy with the scent of ozone and wet earth. Rain lashed against the visors of the gathered heroes, a torrential downpour that turned the mountain trails into slick rivers of mud. Izuku Midoriya stood at the precipice of the ridge, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm against the reinforced plating of his gamma suit. Green lightning arced lazily around his cowl, illuminating the rain droplets in strobe light flashes. He adjusted his gloves, the support items whirring softly as they calibrated to the ambient temperature. "Check comms," Aizawa's voice cut through the static in Izuku's ear. The Erasure hero stood a few meters away, his yellow goggles obscured by the downpour, his capture scarf soaked but ready. "Deku, check," Izuku whispered, tapping his earpiece. "Dynamite, check." "And hurry the hell up," Bakugo's voice growled, sharp and impatient. He was crouched on a rock outcropping to Izuku's left, the grenade bracers on his arms glistening. "My hands are getting cold. I need to blow something up." "Shoto, check," Todoroki's calm monotone followed. "Red Riot, standing by." "Uravity, signals are clear." The roll call continued, a cascade of voices that had become Izuku's anchor. Class 1A, along with a battalion of top pros, Endeavor, Mirko, Crust, and Best Jeanist, were poised to descend. "Listen up," Endeavor's voice boomed over the general channel, commanding silence. "We have thermal signatures indicating mass movement in the lower subterranean levels. They know we're here. We are not doing this stealthily. Team Alpha, you breach the main hangar. Team Beta, secure the perimeter. Team Gamma, Midoriya, Bakugo, Todoroki, Eraserhead, you are the extraction unit. Your goal is the lab core. Secure the doctor. Neutralize the Hyents. Do not hesitate." Izuku took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs. One for all hummed beneath his skin, a thrumming engine of accumulated power waiting to be released. He felt the familiar ghostly presence of the vestiges, a silent reassurance in the back of his mind. Danger sense was quiet, a rarity these days, but the silence felt heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. "Move out," Endeavor commanded. The mountain exploded. The initial breach wasn't a tactical entry, it was an avalanche of violence. Endeavor and Shoto led the charge, a dual helix of fire and ice that shattered the reinforced blast doors of the facility's mountainside entrance. The steel groaned and warped, melting into slag before being blasted inward. Izuku moved in the slipstream of the explosion. He engaged full cowling at 45%, his boots tearing up the concrete floor as he shot into the darkness of the hangar. "Contact!" Bakugo screamed, launching himself over Izuku's head. AP shot! A concentrated beam of explosive force ripped through the gloom, impacting a massive, gray-skinned creature that had lunged from the shadows. The Noma screeched, stumbling back, but didn't fall. "They're near Hyents," Aizawa shouted, leaping from the debris to erase the quirk of a multi-armed beast trying to crush Kirishima. "Don't let them gang up on you. Keep moving toward the elevator shaft." The hangar descended into chaos. There were dozens of them, unfinished perhaps, but terrifyingly strong. Izuku weaved through the melee, a blur of green motion. A Noma with blades for fingers swiped at his head. Izuku ducked, feeling the wind of the cut, and countered with a St. Louis smash to the creature's ribcage. The impact cracked the concrete beneath them, sending the beast flying into a stack of shipping crates. "Deku! On your 6! Uraraka's warning came just as danger sense flared like a migraine. Izuku didn't think, he reacted. He spun, shooting a tendril of black whip onto a ceiling beam, and yanking himself upward. A massive fist, wreathed in acid, punched the space where he had been standing a millisecond before. Thanks, Uraraka! Izuku shouted, swinging around to deliver a double-heeled kick to the acid Noma's skull. Focus on the objective. Best Jeanist's voice cut through the noise. He was controlling the battlefield with fiber cables, restraining 3 Noma at once. Team Gamma, get to the lower levels. We will hold the line here. You heard the man. Bakugo blasted a hole through a wall of debris. Don't fall behind, nerd. I'm right behind you. Izuku landed and sprinted after Bakugo and Todoroki. Aizawa followed close behind, his eyes bloodshot from overuse, his scarf lashing out to snag a villain attempting to flank them. They reached the central elevator shaft. The elevator itself was gone, leaving a gaping maw descending into the earth. It's deep, Todoroki noted, peering over the edge. At least 20 stories. I'll make a slide, Todoroki said, summoning a massive glacier, but Aizawa stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. No time. We jump? Midoriya, catch us. Izuku nodded. Black Whip! Dark, energy-infused tendrils erupted from Izuku's back. He wrapped them around the waists of his teammates. Brace yourselves, they dove. The wind rushed past their ears, the darkness swallowing them whole. Izuku controlled the descent, using additional tendrils to snag the walls of the shaft, slowing their fall in jerky, controlled bursts. They passed floor after floor of dimly lit laboratories, the sounds of the battle above fading into a dull roar. They hit the bottom level, Sector 9, with a heavy thud. Izuku retracted the whips, his breath hitching slightly. The air down here was different. It didn't smell like ozone anymore. It smelled like rot. And dust. Stay sharp, Aizawa whispered, his capture weapon floating around his neck. This is where Garaki would keep his masterpieces. The corridor ahead was lined with massive glass tubes, most of them shattered. Green fluid pooled on the floor, mixing with the dust. Where are the guards? Bakugo muttered, his palms crackling with small explosions. It's too quiet. They're waiting, Izuku said, his voice tight. Danger sense was buzzing, not a sharp spike, but a constant, low-level thrum of anxiety. It felt like the air pressure was dropping. They reached the main blast doors of the central lab. They were open. Standing in the center of the room, amidst a sprawling array of computers and machinery, was not Garaki. It was a single Nomu. It wasn't bulky like the others. It was lean, almost skeletal, with obsidian skin and long, spindly limbs that dragged on the floor. It had no eyes, only a wide, toothy grin that stretched too far across its face. It wore a metal collar that pulsed with a rhythmic red light. That's not a normal Nomu, Todoroki said, igniting his left side. Eraserhead, the creature spoke. Its voice was wet, gurgling, as if its throat was full of blood. The master sends his regards. Aizawa's eyes widened. He activated his quirk immediately, his hair standing on end. It can think. High-end. Engage. Bakugo didn't wait. Die. He launched a howitzer impact straight at the creature. The explosion was blinding, shaking the foundations of the room. But when the smoke cleared, the Nomu was gone. Above. Izuku screamed. The creature was clinging to the ceiling, its limbs contorted. It wasn't attacking them. It was attacking the structural supports. It's not trying to fight us, Aizawa realized with horror. It's trying to bury us. The Nomu slammed its hands into the main load-bearing pillar of the cavern. A shockwave of vibration rippled through the floor. Stop it! Izuku launched himself into the air, Manchester Smash primed. He connected. The impact shattered the Nomu's arm, sending it careening into a bank of servers. But the creature just laughed, a high, chittering sound. Too late, it hissed. The sequence has begun. The collar around its neck beeped rapidly, then detonated. It wasn't a large explosion, but it was precise. It triggered a chain reaction. The charges planted throughout the facility, charges they hadn't seen, began to blow. The ceiling groaned. A sound like the earth tearing apart filled the room. Retreat! Aizawa screamed, his voice cracking. Everyone, back to the shaft. Now! The ground lurched violently, knocking Todoroki off his feet. Izuku grabbed him, hauling him up. The walls began to buckle. The massive concrete slabs above them were shifting, cracking under the weight of the mountain. Run! Bakugo roared, propelling himself forward with explosions. They sprinted back toward the corridor, dodging falling debris. The entire facility was collapsing. This wasn't just a demolition. The villain had destabilized the geological foundation of the mountain itself. They reached the base of the elevator shaft, but the path up was blocked. The slide Todoroki had considered earlier would have been crushed. Tons of rock were raining down the shaft, sealing the exit. Blocked! Bakugo shouted, blasting a falling boulder into pebbles. We need another way. The ventilation output. Aizawa pointed to a grate high on the south wall. It leads to the surface filtration unit. It's our only shot. It was 50 meters up, across a chasm of crumbling infrastructure. I can blast us up there. Bakugo yelled. Do it! Aizawa ordered. But before they could move, the ceiling of the main lab, the massive cavern behind them, gave way completely. A landslide of rock and steel, a literal tidal wave of the mountain's guts, surged toward them. The air pressure spike popped their ears. It's going to crush us! Todoroki yelled, creating a massive ice wall. The ice shattered instantly under the weight of the collapse. Izuku looked at the wave of destruction, then at the ventilation shaft, then at his friends. There wasn't enough time. If they tried to fly up to the vent, the debris wave would catch them in midair and swat them down like flies. Someone had to hold the wave back. Someone had to buy the 3 seconds needed to reach the vent. The decision wasn't conscious. It was instinct. It was the essence of one for all. Go! Izuku shoved Bakugo and Todoroki toward Aizawa. Deku? Bakugo stumbled, looking back. Izuku turned his back to them, facing the oncoming avalanche. He planted his feet. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, pulling on everything. Not 45%. Not the safe limit. One for all, 100%. Black whip. Full 100% bastion. Hundreds of black tendrils exploded from Izuku's back, not lashing out, but weaving together. They slammed into the floor, the walls, and the ceiling, creating a massive, chaotic spiderweb of energy. Izuku grabbed the collapsing superstructure of the mountain with raw power. He screamed. It felt like his arms were being ripped from their sockets. The weight of a mountain pressed down on him. His bones creaked, audibly snapping under the strain, but the black tendrils held. The wave of debris slammed into his barrier of whips and stopped, held back by the sheer force of will and energy. Midoriya! Aizawa screamed, his composure shattering. I can't hold it for long. Izuku gritted out, blood spraying from his mouth as the pressure squeezed his lungs. The green lightning around him was blinding, wild, tearing up the ground beneath his feet. Get out! Now! No! I'm not leaving you! Bakugo lunged forward, his face twisted in pure terror. Deku, stop it! You'll die! Kaken, go! Izuku turned his head, just an inch. His mask was torn, revealing one green eye wide with desperation and tears. Please! Save everyone! Aizawa looked at the structural integrity. He looked at the ventilation shaft. He looked at his student, who was essentially bench-pressing a collapsing tectonic plate. Aizawa made the choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He wrapped his capture scarf around Bakugo and Todoroki. No! Eraser! Let me go! Bakugo thrashed, explosions popping against the fabric, burning Aizawa's arms. DKU! Izuku! Todoroki, create a ramp to the vent! Now! Aizawa roared, his voice carrying the authority of a pro, even as his heart broke. Todoroki, tears streaming down his face, blasted a ramp of ice toward the vent. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Aizawa yanked Bakugo onto the ice. They shot up toward the vent. Bakugo reached out, his hands straining toward Izuku. Izuku! Izuku watched them reach the vent. He saw them disappear into the safety of the shaft. Thank you, Izuku whispered, his vision blurred. The pain was absolute. It was white-hot and blinding. He let go. The mountain came down, outside the exclusion zone. 0325 hours. The collapse registered on seismographs as far away as Tokyo. From the base camp at the foot of the mountain, the heroes watched in horror as the peak of Mount Gunga seemed to implode. The earth rippled like water. Trees were swallowed whole. A massive plume of dust and debris shot into the stratosphere, blocking out the rain. Status. I want a status report now. Endeavor screamed into his comms, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. We lost contact with Team Gamma. Mandalay's voice came over the channel, trembling. Their signals, they're underground. Deep. Dig. Mirko yelled, hopping toward the shifting pile of rubble. Everyone who can move, dig! Suddenly, the debris field near the ventilation output exploded outward. A slide of ice shot out, depositing 3 figures onto the muddy slope. Aizawa hit the ground rolling, protecting the students. Todoroki landed hard on his knees. Bakugo scrambled up instantly, covered in dust and ash. Let me go back! Bakugo screamed, trying to run back up the ice ramp, but the vent collapsed behind them, sealed by falling rock. DKU is still in there. The silence that followed was deafening. Endeavor landed beside them. Where is Midoriya? Aizawa stood up. He was swaying. He looked at the mountain of rubble, then at Endeavor. He stayed behind. He held the ceiling. Endeavor looked at the devastation. Nothing could survive that. Mandalay. Scan for his tracker. Now, scanning. Mandalay shouted from the command tent. I'm picking up, wait. A silence stretched over the comms. What is it? Aizawa demanded, limping toward the tent. I had a signal, Mandalay said, her voice hollow. It was weak. It was erratic. And then, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. From the ruins of the mountain, a new signal emerged. Not a hero's signal. A broadcast. It hijacked their comms. Scritch, scratch. Is this thing on? A voice, distorted and synthesized, crackled in their ears. Oh dear. It seems you've made a mess of my laboratory, Garaki, Endeavor growled. Hardly. I'm just the cleanup crew, the voice, the villain known as Echo, sneered. You're looking for the little green one, aren't you? The one who shines so bright? Where is he? Bakugo screamed at the sky. Oh, he's here. Or parts of him, anyway. Would you like to hear? A sound played over the channel. It was the distinct, undeniable sound of a biomonitor flatlining. The specific frequency code matched Izuku Midoriya's hero license chip. It was the sound designed to alert Central Command of a hero's death. Beep! Boom! Echo laughed. Structural integrity at 0. Biological integrity at 0. Vaporized. Such a waste of a good quirk. The signal cut out. Bakugo fell to his knees. He clawed at the mud, his fingers digging into the wet earth. He didn't scream anymore. He just stared at the ground, his breath coming in ragged gasps. No, Uraraka whispered, standing near the medical tent. She covered her mouth, her eyes wide. No, he can't be. The signal was confirmed, Mandalay said softly, tears running down her cheeks. His biosigns, they're gone. The sensor array confirmed total cessation of life functions. Aizawa stared at the mountain. He felt cold. Colder than he had ever felt. He had left him. He had made the call. Sir! A sidekick ran up to Endeavor. We have multiple villain signatures approaching from the east. Gigantomachia is moving. We need to evacuate. If we stay, we'll be overrun. Endeavor looked at the mountain, then at the weeping students, then at the approaching threat. We can't leave him! Kirishima yelled, hardening his skin as if to fight the order before it was given. We have to dig. If we dig, the rest of the mountain comes down on us, Best Jeanist said, his voice grim. And if Gigantomachia gets here while we are digging, we all die. He's dead, Kirishima, Aizawa said. The words tasted like ash. The sensors confirmed it. The collapse, nothing could survive that. Shut up! Bakugo roared, explosions popping off his hands uncontrollably. He's not dead. He's DKU. He doesn't die. Bakugo, stand down, Best Jeanist said, wrapping a cable around the boy. Get off me. We are leaving, Endeavor ordered, turning his back on the mountain. His flames were dim. Collect the wounded. We retreat to UA. I won't go! Bakugo thrashed, fighting with a ferocity that scared even the pros. Izuku! I'm here! I'm not leaving you! Best Jeanist tightened the cables, sedation gas hissing from a canister on his belt. Bakugo's struggles weakened. His eyes, burning with a mix of rage and utter, crushing grief, stayed fixed on the pile of rocks until they rolled back in his head. "I'm sorry," Best Jeanist whispered, picking up his former intern. The heroes retreated. The rain washed away their footprints. The mountain stood silent, a tomb of rock and mud. Below, pain. That was the first thing. It wasn't a localized pain. It was a total, encompassing existence. It felt as though every cell in his body had been put through a shredder. Izuku Midoriya opened his eyes. Darkness. Absolute, suffocating darkness. He tried to inhale, but his chest hit something solid. He coughed, and the air tasted stale and thick with dust. Panic flared. He tried to move his arms. His left arm was pinned. His right arm moved, but sluggishly. He felt cold metal and rough stone. "Am I dead?" He blinked. One for all flickered. A tiny spark. No. Dead people didn't hurt this much. "Kaken?" he rasped. His voice was a dry croak. Silence. "Aizawa-sensei?" Silence. He tried to summon Black Whip, but the quirk sputtered. He was exhausted. His reserves were drained. He managed to conjure a faint green glow, just enough to see a few inches in front of his face. He was in a pocket. A small void in the rubble. A steel beam had fallen diagonally across a slab of concrete, creating a triangular space barely large enough for him to curl up in. Above him, tons of rock. He remembered the collapse. He remembered the choice. They got out. They have to have gotten out. He shifted his legs. A scream tore from his throat. His left leg. Broken. Badly. He bit his lip until it bled to stop the noise. "Okay," he whispered to himself, the sound trembling in the dark. "Okay. SS. I'm alive. I'm buried. But I'm alive." He reached for his ear. His comms unit was cracked, the plastic housing shattered against his skull. He tapped it anyway. "Static. Mayday," he whispered. "Mayday. This is Deku. Can anyone hear me?" Static. He tried again. Louder. "This is Deku. I'm in the lower levels. Sector. I don't know. Can anyone hear me?" Static. He lay there for what felt like hours. He waited for the sound of digging. He waited for Bakugo's screaming voice telling him he was an idiot. He waited for Uraraka's float. Nothing. Just the settling of the earth. The groan of stressed metal deep within the ruin. He reached into his utility belt. His emergency rations were crushed, but the water pouch was intact. He took a small sip. "They're coming," he told himself. He squeezed his eyes shut, picturing All Might's smile. "They're just regrouping. It's a big mountain. It takes time." He checked his suit's internal chronometer. It was flickering, but readable. Time elapsed since impact, 4 hours. "Just wait," Izuku whispered into the dark. "Just wait. They'll find me. Heroes always come." He closed his eyes, the darkness pressing against his eyelids. Above him, the rain continued to fall on the empty mountain. Below, in the crushing silence of the earth, the static hissed on, the only answer to his prayers. Day 1. The tomb. Time had lost its shape. It no longer moved in seconds or minutes, but in throbs of pain. Izuku lay in the small triangular pocket of space where the world had ended, listening to the silence. It was a heavy, physical thing, this silence. It pressed against his eardrums, heavier than the tons of reinforced concrete and mountain rock that sat above him. He had passed out after the initial collapse. He didn't know for how long. His suit's chronometer was cracked, the display a spiderweb of dead pixels, flashing a nonsensical 88:88. He tried to sit up, but a jagged bolt of agony shot up his left leg, turning his vision white. He gasped, the sound ragged and loud in the small space. He clamped a hand over his mouth, his eyes watering. "SS." Aizawa's voice, dry and logical, echoed in his memory. "Don't panic. SS." Izuku forced himself to look down. The darkness was absolute, but the faint, dying bioluminescence of his gamma suit's lines offered a ghostly, flickering green light. His left leg was trapped under a slab of rebar and masonry. It wasn't crushed, The suit's iron saws and leg bracing had taken the brunt of the impact, but the angle was wrong. His tibia was definitely broken. He could feel the bone grinding. "Okay," he whispered. His voice sounded small. "Okay. Step 1. Get free." He reached out with his mind, grasping for the familiar hum of One for All. It was there, but it was sluggish, like an engine trying to turn over in freezing weather. His body was in shock. "Black Whip," he croaked. 3 tendrils materialized. They were thin, wavering like smoke in a draft, lacking their usual tensile snap. "Come on," he gritted out, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. "Just lift." He wrapped the tendrils around the slab pinning his leg. He braced his good leg against the wall of his prison. He pulled. He screamed. He couldn't help it. The movement jarred the brake, sending a fresh wave of nausea rolling through him. But the slab moved. Just an inch. It was enough. He dragged his leg free, sobbing through his teeth, and collapsed back against the cold dirt. He lay there for a long time, panting, waiting for the black spots in his vision to clear. "They're digging." The thought was a lifeline. He clung to it. "Kakin is up there. Todoroki. Mr. Aizawa. All Might. They're digging. Cementhouse will clear the rubble. Pixie Bob will move the earth. I just have to wait." He needed to stabilize the leg. If he moved around with a loose fracture, he could sever an artery. He stripped off one of his heavy Air Force gloves. He used Black Whip again, more precisely this time, fueled by the adrenaline of pain, to wrap the leg. He commanded the energy to solidify, creating a hardened, dark cast of quirk energy around his calf. It wasn't perfect, and it required a constant, low-level drain on his stamina to maintain, but it held the bone in place. "Status," he muttered, mimicking the hero reports. "Left leg broken. Ribs bruised, maybe cracked. Head wound." He touched his forehead. His fingers came away sticky. "Minor concussion. Suit integrity compromised." He checked his belt. 3 nutrient bars, 1 hydration pouch, half full, a small first aid kit with antiseptic and bandages. His comms unit destroyed. "Not much," he admitted to the dark. "But enough. It's only been, maybe 6 hours? 8? They'll be here by morning." He curled into a ball to conserve heat. The air was getting colder. The ventilation system was obviously destroyed, but there was a draft coming from somewhere, which meant there was oxygen. That was good. He closed his eyes. Tap. 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 He froze. His eyes snapped open. He held his breath. Tap. Tap. It was faint. Rhythmic. "Hello?" Izuki yelled, his voice cracking. "I'm here. Down here." He grabbed a piece of loose rebar and slammed it against the steel beam above him. Clang. 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 "This is Deku. I'm alive. I'm in sector." He hesitated. He didn't know the sector. "I'm below the lab. Can you hear me?" He waited. Drip. Drip. Just water. Leaking from a fractured pipe somewhere in the darkness. Izuku lowered the rebar. A bitter taste filled his mouth. "It's okay," he whispered, his hand shaking. "They're just too far up. They can't hear me yet. But they're coming." Day 3. The hunger. Thirst was a different kind of monster than pain. Pain was loud, thirst was a quiet, constant pressure that slowly drove you mad. Izuku had finished his water pouch yesterday. Or what he thought was yesterday. Without the sun, his sleep cycle had shattered. He slept in fitful, 20-minute bursts, waking up with his heart hammering, sure that he had heard an explosion or a shout. He had moved from his initial pocket. The air had grown too stale, and he needed water. Navigating the ruins was a nightmare. The facility was a twisted labyrinth of crushed hallways and collapsed ceilings. He moved like a ghost, limping heavily on his Black Whip splinted leg, using danger sense to avoid unstable floors. The quirk was acting strangely. It was constantly buzzing at the base of his skull, a low-level static that meant general hostility. The mountain itself felt hostile. He found a break room on what used to be level 8. The ceiling had caved in, crushing the tables and chairs, but a vending machine had survived, wedged into a corner. Izuku stared at it like it was the Holy Grail. The glass was shattered, but the bottles inside were intact. Jackpot, he rasped. His lips were chapped and bleeding. He used a burst of power to rip the metal front off the machine. He grabbed a bottle of mineral water, twisted the cap, and drained it in 3 seconds. He grabbed another. He stopped himself. Rationing. Ida's voice. Strict. Stern. Midoriya, you do not know the duration of the mission. You must ration. Right, Izuku murmured. Sorry, Ida-kun. He put the second bottle in his pouch. He gathered as many as he could carry, 6 bottles of water, 3 cans of coffee, and a few bags of stale pretzels. He sat on the floor of the ruined break room, crunching on a pretzel. It tasted like dust. It's taking a while, he said aloud. He had started talking to himself on day 2. It helped push back the silence. Must be unstable soil. Cementos has to be careful not to cause a secondary collapse. That makes sense. It's the smart play. He looked at the pile of rubble blocking the hallway he had come from. Kaken is probably losing his mind, Izuku chuckled dryly. The sound was rough. He's probably yelling at the rescue workers to dig faster. I hope he doesn't blast anyone, he imagined it. Bakugo screaming. Uraraka lifting boulders. Mr. Aizawa supervising with his logical, tired eyes. A sudden pang of loneliness hit him so hard it almost doubled him over. He pulled his knees to his chest. I'm here, he whispered. I'm still here. He needed to do something. He couldn't just sit. If he sat, he thought about the weight of the rock above him. Make a signal. He stood up. If I can find the power grid, or a terminal, maybe I can boost the signal. He began to search. Day 6, the ghost in the machine. The hallucinations started on day 5, mostly auditory. He would hear the swish of a cape, or the heavy thud of All Might's landing. Once, he swore he saw his mother standing at the end of a dark corridor, holding a basket of laundry. Mom? He had called out, stumbling forward. But when he reached the spot, it was just a hanging bundle of wires and insulation swaying in the draft. He sat on the floor and cried for 10 minutes, then slapped his face hard enough to leave a mark. Focus, he hissed. You are a hero student. Act like it. He had found the auxiliary security hub. It was a small, hardened bunker on level 9 meant for monitoring the test subjects. The door had been blasted off its hinges, likely during the initial raid or the internal explosions. Inside, it was a wreck. Banks of monitors were smashed. The floor was littered with papers and Izuku stopped. There was a body in the chair. It was a villain. A member of the PLF, judging by the tactical gear. He had been crushed by a falling ceiling tile. Izuku stood frozen. He had seen dead bodies before. The war had taken away that innocence. But being alone with one in the dark was different. I'm sorry, Izuku whispered to the corpse. He gently moved the body to the floor and covered it with a tarp he found in a locker. It was a small respect, but it made him feel human. He turned his attention to the console. Most of it was dead. But one panel, a short-range localized receiver, had a faint, blinking amber light. Emergency power. Okay, Izuku breathed. He sat in the chair, ignoring the dried blood on the armrest. Okay. Let's see what you can do. He was good at this. He was a nerd. He had spent his childhood analyzing support gear, taking apart radios and putting them back together. He pulled a small toolkit from his belt. His hands were shaking from low blood sugar and exhaustion, but his mind sharpened. The transmitter was fried. The antenna output was severed. I can't send, he realized, slumping back. I can't tell them where I am. He stared at the wires. But maybe I can hear. If he could hear them, he would know how close they were. He would know if they were drilling from the north or the south. He would know if he should move. He began to work. He worked for hours, fueled by a manic hope. He stripped wires with his teeth. He used tiny, controlled sparks of one for all to solder connections, biting his tongue in concentration. Just a simple loop, he muttered. Bypass the encryption. Open the frequency range. Come on, he needed a power boost. The emergency battery was fading. He looked at his arm. The support gauntlets. They had capacitors. He dismantled his left gauntlet. It felt like taking off a piece of his skin, but he needed the battery cell. He jury-rigged the cell to the receiver's input. The console hummed. A screen flickered to life. Static roared through the speakers. SSSSSHHHHHHHHHHH. Izuku grinned. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. He dialed the frequency knob. Come on, he whispered. Hero frequency. Channel 14.5. Come on, Kaken. Say something. Static. He turned the dial. Police bands. Emergency broadcast. Static. Too deep, he realized, his heart sinking. The rock is too thick. The signal can't penetrate. He refused to give up. He adjusted the gain. He rerouted the signal through the facility's internal wiring, trying to turn the entire building's copper into a giant antenna. ZZZZZT, weather, rain, ZZZZT, Izuku gasped. A voice. He turned the dial infinitesimally slow. Continued efforts in the ZZZZT, massive cleanup operation. It was the news. A public AM radio broadcast. AM waves traveled further, penetrated deeper. Yes. Izuku cheered, punching the air. I've got the outside. I've got the world. He leaned in closer to the speaker, his ear pressed against the grill. Traffic backed up on the highway due to the villain transport convoys. Normalcy. The world was still turning. That was good. It meant the villains hadn't won. It meant the raid was successful. Talk about the rescue, Izuku pleaded. Talk about the heroes at the mountain. He listened for hours. He drank another water bottle. He ate a packet of dry crackers. He learned that Endeavor was in the hospital recovering from burns. He learned that the PLF leadership had been decimated, but no mention of the search for the missing student. They're keeping it quiet, Izuku reasoned. OP-SEC. They don't want the villains to know I'm alive down here. Smart. Very smart. He felt a surge of pride in his teachers. They were protecting him even now. He curled up in the chair, the static lulling him to sleep. For the first time in a week, he slept without nightmares. He was connected. He wasn't alone. Day 11, the rat. His supplies were running low again. Izuku was down to 2 bottles of water. The hunger was a sharp, twisting knife in his gut. His leg was healing, thanks to the enhanced durability of One for All, but it was slow. It itched maddeningly under the black whip cast. He had spent the last 2 days scavenging near the security hub. He found a flashlight with dying batteries. He found a stash of protein bars in a locker, which he devoured with tears in his eyes. But he noticed something else. The rats. They were huge. Not normal rats. They were hairless, with patches of scales or extra eyes. Mutated by the leaked chemicals? Or failed experiments? They watched him. He was sitting in the security hub, tuning the radio, when a rat the size of a cat skittered across the console. Hey! Izuku swatted at it. The rat didn't run. It hissed, baring needle-like teeth. Its eyes glowed red. Izuku activated full cowling, just 5%. The green lightning scared it off. Even the rats are villains down here, he muttered. He turned back to the radio. He had a routine now. Every morning, or what he assumed was morning, he scanned the channels. He found a music station. He listened to a pop song he recognized. Jiro had played it in the dorms once. He hummed along, swaying slightly. It made him feel like he was back in the common room, waiting for Sato to bake a cake. I wonder if they're back at school. He mused. Maybe they're rotating shifts. Class B is probably helping dig. He adjusted the dial. Breaking news ZZZZT. Special broadcast. Izuku froze. Special broadcast. Live from UA High School. UA? Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. They're broadcasting from UA? He turned the volume up as high as it would go without distorting. Gathering of heroes, students, and family members. A somber day for the nation. Somber? Izuku frowned. Did someone die? Did Endeavor not make it? Fear gripped him. If a pro-hero died, that was huge news. We now go live to the podium, where All Might is expected to speak. All Might. Izuku grinned. All Might is okay. He's speaking. He leaned back, relief washing over him. If All Might was speaking, everything was going to be alright. He would probably give a speech about resilience. About how they wouldn't stop until they found the survivors. It was a message. A message specifically for Izuku. I am coming. I'm listening, All Might, Izuku whispered, closing his eyes. I'm right here. The static cleared slightly. The audio quality was tinny, but recognizable. The sound of a crowd. Not cheering. Murmuring. Sniffling. Then, the heavy, slow footsteps approaching a microphone. Thump. Thump. A throat cleared. It sounded wet. All Might's voice. But it was wrong. It wasn't the booming voice of the symbol of peace. It wasn't even the gentle, firm voice of Tashinori Yagi the teacher. It was the voice of a man who had been hollowed out. I have stood at many podiums, All Might said. I have given many speeches. I have celebrated victories, and I have mourned defeats. Izuku nodded. Yes. The war was hard, but today... A pause. A long, agonizing pause. Today, I have no words of victory. Today, I am just a man who has lost everything. Izuku's smile faltered. Lost everything? No, All Might, you didn't lose everything. I'm here. We are gathered here to honor the memory. Izuku stopped breathing. To honor the memory of a student. A hero. A boy who taught me what it truly means to smile in the face of despair. No, Izuku whispered. The word barely had sound. Izuku Midoriya. The name hung in the air of the security room. It bounced off the metal walls. It rattled inside Izuku's skull. He was... All Might's voice cracked. He was crying. Izuku could hear the hitch in his breath. He was the best of us. He ran into the fire when others ran away. He held up the sky so that his friends could live. I'm alive, Izuku said. He stood up. He walked toward the radio. I'm alive! Stop it! I'm alive! The collapse was total, All Might continued. The sensors confirmed. He was gone in an instant. He didn't suffer. I am suffering! Izuku screamed. He slammed his fist onto the console. I'm starving! My leg is broken! I'm scared! I'm right here! The radio didn't care. The broadcast continued. He leaves behind a mother. Inko, Mom, Izuku choked. He slid down the front of the console, his legs giving out. Don't tell Mom. Please don't tell Mom. And a class that loved him. Young Bakugo. Young Uraraka, they are here today, standing tall, because he gave them the chance to. Izuku curled into a ball on the floor. He covered his ears, but he couldn't block out the sound. He couldn't block out the sound of his own funeral. Rest now, my boy, All Might whispered. You did enough. You saved everyone. You can rest. Then silence. A moment of silence observed by the entire nation. In the underground bunker, the silence was different. It wasn't the expectant silence of a waiting room anymore. It was the finality of a grave. They aren't digging. The thought wasn't a panic response this time. It was a cold, hard fact. Like the stone above his head. They think I'm dead. The censor said I'm dead? So they stopped. He thought about the days he had spent waiting. While he was setting his own broken bone, they were writing his obituary. While he was drinking stale water and fighting off rats, they were picking out flowers. While he was tapping SOS on the pipes, praying for a sound, they were burying an empty casket. They left me, he whispered. The realization fractured something deep inside him. It wasn't just his heart. It was the foundation of his worldview. Heroes always come. That was the rule. That was the promise. But they weren't coming. The broadcast switched to a commentator. Truly a tragic loss. In other news, the reconstruction of the mountain containment zone has been halted due to instability. The area has been designated a permanent exclusion zone. No entry will be permitted. Exclusion zone, Izuku repeated. No entry. They weren't just not looking. They were sealing him in. He looked at the radio. The green light of the receiver blinked steadily. He reached out. His hand was steady now. The shaking had stopped. He turned the dial. Click. The voice cut off. The static died. The room plunged back into silence. Izuku sat there for a long time. The darkness seemed to press closer, eager to claim him. He felt the tears drying on his face. They felt tight, like a mask. He looked at the All Might trading card he kept in his utility belt pouch. He pulled it out. It was creased, stained with dirt and blood. All Might, smiling fearlessly. You can rest, All Might had said. No, Izuku said. His voice was different. The waver was gone. The desperation was gone. He stood up. He ignored the pain in his leg. I won't rest. He looked at the dead villain in the corner. He looked at the shadows stretching out the door into the labyrinth of the facility. If the world thought he was dead, then Izuku Midoriya, the student, the fanboy, the boy who waited for rescue, was dead. But the bearer of One for All was still breathing. He walked over to the locker where he had found the tarp. He ripped a strip of cloth from it. He tied it around his forehead, pushing his unruly, matted hair back. He walked to the door of the security hub. He looked out into the abyss of the underground ruins. Danger sense flared. There were things out there in the dark. The failed Nomu. The scavengers. The mutants. They were hungry. Izuku activated full cowling. The green lightning crackled, harsh and jagged in the gloom. It didn't look like a hero's light anymore. It looked like a warning. You gave up on me, he whispered to the ceiling, to the millions of tons of rock, to the mentors who had walked away. He clenched his fists. Black whip erupted from his back, writhing like angry snakes, sharper and more violent than before. Fine. I'll save myself. He stepped out of the room, into the hunting grounds. Day 92, the ecosystem. The dark was not empty. That was the first lesson of the deep. The dark had teeth. It had hunger. It had a heartbeat that thrummed through the rusted rebar and the cracked concrete, a rhythm of shuffling feet and wet, gurgling breaths. Izuku Midoriya crouched on a steel girder 20 feet above the floor of what used to be a thermal regulation chamber. He was perfectly still. Even his breathing was shallow, controlled, virtually silent. He looked different. The boy who had fallen into the hole 3 months ago, soft-faced, bright-eyed, wearing a costume his mother had lovingly washed, was gone. In his place was a creature of the ruins. His gamma suit was a patchwork of survival. The dark green fabric was stained permanently with grime, oil, and dried blood. The white gloves were gray, the knuckles reinforced with jagged scraps of titanium plating scavenged from destroyed server racks. His iron soles were scratched and dented, wrapped in strips of rubber tire to muffle his footsteps. Most striking was the cape. It was a heavy, fire-resistant tarp he had salvaged, charred black on one side, wrapped around his shoulders like a cowl to hide his green lightning in the gloom. The hood was pulled up, the tattered remains of his bunny-ear mask hanging limp and torn, giving him the silhouette of a broken demon. Danger sense tickled the back of his neck. A cold, sliding sensation. Below. 4 o'clock. Hunting. Izuku didn't flinch. He slowly shifted his gaze. Down in the gloom, amidst a maze of burst pipes and stagnant water, a shape moved. It was a skulker. That's what Izuku called them. A failed Nomu experiment. It was the size of a large dog, but humanoid, with translucent skin stretched tight over warped bone. It had no eyes, just massive auditory canals and a mouth full of needle teeth. It was blind, but it could hear a heartbeat from 50 meters. It was sniffing the air. It smelled the bait. Izuku had left a piece of dried meat, rat, stringy and tough, on a flat rock in the center of the chamber. The skulker crept forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. It let out a low hiss, tasting the scent. It lunged for the meat. Now, Izuku didn't scream smash. He didn't announce his presence. He dropped. Gravity took him. He engaged full cowling at 8%, just enough to enhance his speed without lighting up the room like a flare. He fell silently, black tendrils of energy unspooling from his back not to catch him, but to guide him. He landed directly on the creature's back. There was a sickening crunch as his iron soul drove the creature's spine into the concrete. The skulker shrieked, a high-pitched sound that would attract others, but Izuku was already moving. Black whip shot out, wrapping around the creature's muzzle, silencing the scream. With a grim, practiced efficiency, Izuku twisted his hips and jerked the whip. Snap! The creature went limp. Izuku stood up, his chest heaving slightly. He scanned the perimeter. Danger sense was quiet. The kill had been clean. He didn't celebrate. He didn't feel triumph. He pulled a serrated knife, fashioned from a shard of a villain's blade, from his belt. He knelt by the carcass. The meat on the skulker's thighs was toxic, full of quirk-enhancing drugs and rot, but the chemical sac at the base of its neck contained a fluid that burned with high heat. Fuel. Sorry, Izuku whispered. The word was a reflex, a ghost of his old self, but his hands didn't hesitate as he carved out the fuel sac. He bagged the resource, wiped his blade on his tarp cape, and shot a black whip to the ceiling, vanishing back into the rafters just as the sound of more shuffling feet approached the smell of blood. This was life now. Kill or starve. Hide or die. Day 94. The Den. Izuku's base of operations, his den, was located in Sector 4, inside the casing of a massive, defunct geothermal turbine. The walls were 3 feet of lead and steel, shielding him from the radiation leaking from the lower labs and masking his heat signature from the more advanced Noma that patrolled the corridors. It was a grim little home. A pile of scavenged mattresses and blankets formed a nest in one corner. The walls were covered in charcoal drawings, maps of the facility, patrol routes of the high-ends, and a calendar of tally marks that seemed to stretch on forever. In the center of the room, a small fire burned inside a metal drum, fueled by the chemical sacs and dried debris. It cast long, dancing shadows against the curved walls. Izuku sat by the fire, sharpening his knife. He was shirtless, the heat of the turbine casing keeping the room bearable. His body was a map of his survival. A jagged scar ran from his shoulder to his pectoral, a gift from a bladed Nomu on day 45. His arms were covered in smaller cuts and burns. He was leaner, the soft bulk of his gym training replaced by the wiry, corded muscle of a predator. 94, he muttered to the fire. You're losing count, kid, a voice echoed in his head. Daigoro Banjo. The 5th user. I'm not, Izuku replied aloud. He spoke to them often. They were the only ones who answered. I count the sleep cycles. It's been 94. Does it matter? Another voice. 2nd. He was sharper, more cynical. Topside has written you off. The calendar is just torture. It matters, Izuku said, testing the edge of the blade against his thumb. A bead of blood welled up. It measures how long I've survived. He reached for a tin can sitting near the fire. Inside was a stew made of filtered water, compressed protein bricks scavenged from a villain's supply cache, and some edible fungus he'd found growing in the damp sectors. It tasted like wet cardboard and salt. He ate it mechanically. He wasn't waiting for rescue anymore. That hope had died on day 11, with the funeral broadcast. It had rotted away, turning into a hard, cold knot in his stomach. Now, he had a different goal: clearance. He looked at the map on the wall. The facility was massive, a subterranean city. He had mapped about 30% of it. The upper levels were collapsed, sealed by megatons of rock. The lower levels were flooded or irradiated, but the middle levels, sectors 3 through 7, were a war zone. There were factions. The feral Nomu roamed everywhere, mindless beasts. The rejects, villains who had been trapped down here during the raid, cut off from their masters. They had formed gangs, fighting over food and territory, and something else. The Keepers. Izuku had only seen them twice. They were intelligent Nomu. Not Hyans like Hood, but smarter than the Grunts. They wore armor. They patrolled specific areas. They were guarding something in Sector 2. If I can get to Sector 2, Izuku murmured, tracing a line on his charcoal map. Maybe there's a secondary elevator. Or a comms array that hits a satellite. It's a suicide run, Banjo warned. That sector is crawling with the big uglies. Staying here is suicide, Izuku countered. I'm down to 3 protein bricks. The water filters are clogging. I have to move up. Danger sense flared. Izuku froze. The spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. This wasn't the usual buzz of a patrolling beast. This was sharp. Urgent. Pain. Fear. Human fear. Not me, Izuku realized. Someone else. Leave it, Second said instantly. It's a trap. Or it's a villain getting what he deserves. Izuku stood up, grabbing his shirt and gamma armor. Villains don't scream like that. Kid, you barely have the calories to keep your quirk active, Banjo said, though his tone was softer. You play hero, you starve. Izuku pulled the cowl over his head. His green eyes, duller now but burning with a cold intensity, reflected the firelight. "I'm not playing hero," Izuku growled, strapping his iron saws on. "I'm protecting my territory." He kicked dirt over the fire, plunging the room into darkness, and vanished into the ventilation shaft. The hunting grounds, Sector 6. The scream came from the old cafeteria level. It was a cavernous space, the ceiling partially collapsed, shadows stretching long and deep. The air smelled of mold and old grease. Izuku moved through the overhead ductwork, silent as a spider. Danger Sense was screaming now, a cacophony of warnings. He peered through a rusted grate. Below, in the center of the cafeteria, a drama was playing out. There were 5 humans. They looked ragged, emaciated. Their clothes were rags. 3 men, 2 women. They were huddled back to back, brandishing makeshift weapons, pipes, a piece of glass, a broken chair leg. Surrounding them were the laughers. Laughers were quadrupedal Nomu, built for speed. They had oversized jaws and vocal cords that emitted a sound like a manic, high-pitched giggle. There were 6 of them. They were circling, toying with their prey. "Back!" one of the men yelled, swinging a pipe. He was big, muscular, wearing the tattered remains of a PLF grunt uniform. "Get back, my leg," one of the women sobbed. She was on the ground, clutching a bleeding shin. She wore a lab coat that was gray with filth. "I can't run." "Shut up, Yumi!" the PLF grunt snapped. "You attract them, villains," seconds sneered in Izuku's head. "Let them rot." Izuku watched. He analyzed. The PLF grunt, Takeshi probably, was strong but exhausted. The woman, Yumi, was civilian staff. A nurse or a tech. The other 3 looked like scavengers. Low-level criminals who picked the wrong day to loot a base. They were villains. Technically. But the laughers didn't care about ideology. They were monsters eating people. One of the laughers lunged. It didn't go for the throat. It went for the hamstring of the man holding the glass shard. It bit down, tore, and retreated, giggling as the man screamed and fell. "No! Kenji!" Yumi shrieked. The circle tightened. The Nomu were drooling, the acid saliva hissing on the floor tiles. Izuku didn't feel the surge of heroic adrenaline he used to feel. He didn't feel the urge to shout, "Everything is fine." He felt a cold calculation. 6 targets. Fast movers. Weak necks. Vulnerable to concussive force. He kicked the grate out. It fell 40 feet, clanging loudly against the floor. The laughers stopped. The humans looked up. Izuku dropped. He didn't land softly this time. He used FA gene. He had been practicing it, building up kinetic energy in his legs during his patrols. He released it on impact. Boom! He landed directly on the head of the lead laugher. The creature didn't just die. It was obliterated. Its head vanished in a spray of purple blood and bone shards. The floor cracked in a 10-meter radius, the shockwave knocking the other Nomu off their feet and sending the humans sprawling. Silence. Dust swirled in the beam of a flickering emergency light. Slowly, the figure in the center stood up. The humans stared. They saw a demon. A figure draped in a charred black cape, green lightning arcing violently around him, his face hidden by a hood and a metal respirator mask he had scavenged. "What?" Takeshi, the PLF grunt, stammered, raising his pipe. "What the hell are you?" Izuku ignored him. He turned his head to the remaining 5 laughers. They were recovering. They hissed, their giggling turning into low growls. They didn't fear him yet. They were hungry. "Leave," Izuku said. His voice was distorted by the mask, a metallic rasp. The laughers attacked all at once. Izuku moved. He didn't dodge. He stepped into the space where the attacks would be. Danger Sense gave him the map. One for All gave him the speed. A laugher lunged for his throat. Izuku caught it by the throat with his left hand, Black Whip erupting to bind its limbs instantly. Smash! He squeezed. The neck snapped with a wet pop. He threw the corpse at another laugher, knocking it out of the air. 2 more flanked him. St. Louis. Izuku pivoted on one hand, his legs sweeping out in a side-like kick powered by 20%. Guillotine. His iron saws connected with their skulls. The impact sounded like a gunshot. Both Nomu were launched across the room, slamming into the concrete wall with enough force to embed them in the plaster. They didn't move again. The last standing laugher, the smallest one, paused. It looked at its dead pack mates. It looked at the green demon. It whimpered. "Run," Izuku commanded. It turned and fled, scrabbling over the debris, its giggles replaced by terrified squeals. Izuku stood amidst the carnage. He shook the blood off his glove. He turned to the humans. They were terrified. More terrified of him than they had been of the monsters. Takashi, the grunt, was shaking. You're a hero? Are you a hero?" Izuku looked at them. He looked at the PLF tattoos on the man's arm. He looked at the nurse. "I'm alive," Izuku said. "Are you?" "We." Yumi swallowed hard. "We're alive. Please. Don't hurt us." Izuku walked toward them. They flinched. He stopped. "You're bleeding," he said, pointing to Yumi's leg. "The scent attracts them. You need to cover it." He reached into his pouch and tossed the roll of scavenged bandages, rough gray gauze, at her. She caught it, surprised. "Thank you. Who are you?" Kenji, the man who had been bitten, groaned from the floor. "Why help us? You're noisy," Izuku said coldly. "Your screaming brings the Hyents." "I don't want Hyents in my sector." It was a lie. Mostly. He helped them because he couldn't just watch them die. But he couldn't let them know he was soft. Softness was weakness. "Where did you come from?" Izuku asked. "Level 3, Takashi said, lowering his pipe but keeping his muscles tense. "We were stuck in a storage locker when the mountain came down. We've been moving down, trying to find food." "Level 3 is sealed? Collapsed?" Takashi confirmed. "We tried to dig up. There's nothing. Just rock. And the gas." "Gas? Mustard gas," Takashi shuddered. Garaki had fail-safes. "The upper levels are filled with it. If you go up, you melt." Izuku absorbed this. The surface was truly cut off. "And below?" "Hell," Takashi said. "Just hell." Izuku nodded. "Right." He turned to leave. "Wait!" Yumi called out. She struggled to stand. You know this place? You know how to fight them?" Izuku paused. "We can't survive out here," she pleaded. "We have no food. We have no quirks that work on these things. Please. Let us go with you." Izuku looked at them. 5 mouths to feed. 5 liabilities. Danger sense wasn't warning him of them. They were too weak to be a threat. "Don't do it," Ninth Second warned. "They are dead weight." "They're people," Yoichi, the first user, whispered. "You are still a protector." Izuku looked at the darkness of the corridor. He looked at his own hands stained with purple blood. "I don't have enough food for you," Izuku said flatly. "We can work," Takashi said. "I can scavenge. I'm strong. Yumi is a medic. She can fix that cut on your chest." Izuku touched his chest. He had forgotten about the ache. "We have a water purifier," Kenji added, desperate. "Portable. Solar, well, battery-powered. But it works." Izuku stopped. "A water purifier." His was failing. He turned back. His green eyes narrowed behind the mask. "Follow me," he said. "Keep up. If you fall behind, I leave you. If you steal from me, I break your hands. If you signal anyone, I kill you." The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. "Understood," Takashi said, gulping. "Move." Day 105, the warlord of Sector 4. The den had changed. It was no longer just a hole in a turbine. It was a camp. The main room had been cleared out. Rubble had been moved to create barricades. The fire drum was larger, venting smoke through a makeshift chimney Izuku had blasted into a ventilation shaft. Yumi was tending to a pot of stew, this one smelling better, thanks to some dried herbs Takashi had found in a hydroponics lab. Kenji and the other scavenger, a nervous boy named Hiro, were sorting scrap metal. Izuku sat on his throne, a captain's chair salvaged from a control room, perched on a raised platform of concrete. He was watching them. He wasn't their friend. He wasn't their hero. He was their alpha. In the weeks since he had taken them in, the dynamic had shifted. They feared him, yes. But they also looked at him with a terrifying reverence. He brought the food. He killed the monsters. He was the god of their small, dark world. "Boss," Takashi said, approaching the platform. He kept his head lowered. "Patrol report." Speak, Izuku said. He was stitching a tear in his glove. Sector 5 is clear. The pack of laughers moved south. But we saw signs of something else near the east stairwell. What signs? Crushed walls. Big ones? And ice. Izuku looked up. Ice? Yeah. Patches of frost. It's cold over there. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. Todoroki? No. Impossible. Todoroki was surface. If he was down here, he would have melted the mountain to get to Izuku by now. A villain with an ice quirk? Izuku asked. Maybe. Or a Noma. There was an ice type in the labs, I think, Yumi chimed in. Project Winter. Izuku stood up. The movement made everyone in the room flinch slightly. I'll check it, Izuku said. Alone? Takashi asked. I can come. I have a pipe. You guard the camp, Izuku ordered. If anything comes through that door that isn't me, you hold the line until I get back. Or you die. Yes, boss. Izuku grabbed his cape. He paused by Yumi. My call, he said. Is it fixed? Yumi nodded quickly. She handed him the hood. She had stitched the tears with wire and thread. The bunny ears were shorter now, jagged, but they stood up. It looks scary, she admitted. Good, Izuku said. He pulled it on. He walked to the exit. He felt the weight of their eyes on him. He felt the burden of their lives. He hated it. And he needed it. It kept the silence away. The encounter. The east stairwell was freezing. Frost coated the metal railings. Breath misted in the air. Izuku moved cautiously. Danger sense was giving him a low, throbbing warning. Cold. Hostile. Powerful. He found the source in a large atrium connecting Sector 4 and Sector 5. It wasn't Todoroki. It was a villain. He was sitting on a block of ice, surrounded by frozen corpses of Nomu. He was tall, wearing a white fur coat that was stained brown. He had pale blue skin and horns made of ice. Giton, Izuku whispered. The PLF lieutenant. Giton looked up. His eyes were wild, sunken. He was starving, crazed. Another bug, Giton hissed. He waved a hand. A spike of ice the size of a telephone pole shot toward Izuku. Izuku didn't panic. He hopped to the side, the ice shattering against the wall where he had been. You, Giton said, squinting. I know you. The rabbit. Surrender, Izuku said. His voice was flat. Or leave. Giton laughed. It was a brittle, cracking sound. Leave? To where? The sky is stone. The ground is rot. There is only the cold. He stood up, gathering a massive storm of ice shards around him. I need meat. Giton screamed. You look like you have strong meat. He unleashed a blizzard. The atrium became a shredder of razor-sharp ice. Izuku engaged one for all, 20%. He danced through the storm. The ice cut his cape, nicked his cheek, but he didn't stop. He closed the distance. Black whip! 6 tendrils shot out, smashing through the ice wall. They wrapped around Giton's waist and arms. Die! Giton roared, freezing the whips. The black energy turned brittle and shattered. Izuku's eyes widened. He's strong. Desperate strength. Giton formed a massive hammer of ice and brought it down. Izuku rolled forward, narrowly avoiding being crushed. The floor exploded. Smash! Izuku punched the air. Air Force. A cannonball of pressurized air slammed into Giton, knocking him back. But Giton used the ice on his back to slide, recovering instantly. He launched a barrage of icicles. One caught Izuku in the shoulder. It pierced the armor, digging into the flesh. Izuku grunted, stumbling back. Finish it, 9th, Banjo yelled. He's going to bring the ceiling down. Izuku saw the cracks forming in the roof. The ice was expanding, stressing the supports. Stop! Izuku yelled. You'll kill us both. I don't care. Giton shrieked. Let it fall. Let it all end. He was suicidal. He wanted to die, and he wanted to take everything with him. Izuku felt a flash of pity. Then, he felt the cold resolve he had learned in the dark. He couldn't save someone who wanted to die. Not when he had 5 people waiting for him who wanted to live. Izuku took a deep breath. F.A. Gene. Load. 30%. One for all. 45%. Black whip. Brace. he blurred. He moved faster than Geeton could track. He appeared directly in front of the ice villain. Geeton's eyes went wide. Wait, Izuku didn't wait. He didn't punch the face. He punched the solar plexus. Manchester smash. It was a controlled demolition. The impact folded Geeton in half. Ribs shattered. The shockwave blew the ice armor off his body. Geeton flew backward, slamming into a concrete pillar. He slid down, coughing blood. He didn't get up. The ice storm ceased. Izuku stood over him, panting. He pulled the icicle out of his shoulder with a grunt, tossing it aside. Geeton looked up, his vision fading. You're not a hero. No, Izuku said, looking down at the broken villain. I'm a survivor. Geeton chuckled, blood bubbling on his lips. Good luck. He slumped over. Dead. Izuku stood there for a moment. He checked the body. No food. But the coat, the fur coat, was warm. He stripped the coat off the corpse. He put it on over his tattered suit. It was heavy, warm. It smelled of ozone and blood. He looked at his reflection in a shard of ice. The green rabbit cowl. The white fur coat. The metal mask. The glowing eyes. He looked like a king of the wasteland. The return. He walked back to the camp. Takashi and Yumi were waiting at the barricade. They saw him coming out of the dark, wearing the skin of a lieutenant. They lowered their weapons. Boss? Takashi asked, eyeing the coat. Geeton, Izuku said simply. He won't bother us. He walked past them, toward his throne. He was exhausted. His shoulder throbbed. Did you? Yumi started, then stopped. She saw the blood on his hands. It wasn't purple. It was red. Izuku sat down. He leaned back, the fur coat draping over the chair. We need to reinforce the east wall, Izuku said, his voice void of emotion. The ice weakened the structure. Takashi, take Kenji and strip the rebar from the hallway. Do it now. Yes, boss. Takashi scrambled to obey. Izuku closed his eyes. Are you okay, kid? Banjo asked softly. I'm warm, Izuku replied in his mind. That's not what I meant. I know, Izuku thought. But it's the only answer that matters. He felt the darkness of the room. It didn't feel pressing anymore. It felt like a blanket. He had adapted. He had evolved. Izuku Midoriya was gone. The ghost of the ruins was here. And he was hungry. The void. The first snow of winter fell on Mizuta for 3 months after the collapse of Gunga Mountain. It was a gentle snow, dusting the sprawling campus of UA High in a pristine, suffocating white. Inside Class 1A, the heating system hummed with a low, drowsy vibration. It was third period, Hero Informatics. Shota Aizawa stood at the podium. He looked the same as always, black tactical gear, capture scarf wound tight, hair unkempt. But if you looked closer, you saw the differences. The lines around his mouth were deeper. His eyes were no longer just dry. They were hollow, like 2 burnt-out coals. He moved with a stiffness that spoke of old injuries that refused to heal, or perhaps a burden that weighed heavier than gravity. Open your tablets to the file on disaster mitigation, Aizawa said. His voice was flat. Monotone. It lacked the sharp edge of threat it used to carry. 20 students sat in the room. No. 19. The silence was the loudest thing in the class. For the first month, the silence had been sharp. Every time Aizawa asked a question, the class would instinctively pause, waiting for the frantic muttering, the scratching of a pencil, the hand shooting up with nervous energy. They waited for the analysis. Now, 3 months later, the silence was just heavy. It was a physical gap in the air pressure of the room. Desk 18 sat near the back. It wasn't empty. Aizawa hadn't allowed them to turn it into a shrine. We are a school, not a graveyard, he had said, though his voice had cracked when he said it. So, the desk remained. There was a textbook on it. A spare notebook. It looked like the student had just stepped out to the bathroom, but the chair was pushed in. Dust motes danced in the shaft of winter sunlight that hit the wood, undisturbed. Jayorozu, Aizawa called out. Read the case study on the Kamino Ward incident regarding civilian evacuation protocols. Momo Jayorozu stood up. She looked thinner. Her ponytail was impeccable, her uniform pressed, but her eyes were rimmed with red. She read efficiently, perfectly. But there was no passion. Bakugo Katsuki sat in front of the empty desk. He didn't slouch anymore. He sat rigid, his back straight as a rod, staring at the back of Kirishima's head with an intensity that should have burned a hole through the redhead's skull. His hands were clenched on his desk, not popping with explosions, but white-knuckled, holding onto the wood as if it were the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. He didn't turn around. He never turned around. If he turned around, he would see the empty chair. And if he saw the empty chair, he would remember the hand reaching out from the darkness. Kaken go, Bakugo's pen snapped. The plastic shard skittered across the floor, loud in the quiet room. Nobody looked. Nobody laughed. Aizawa paused. He looked at Bakugo. Get a new pen, Bakugo. I don't need one, Bakugo rasped. His voice was gravel. He hadn't yelled, really yelled, in 80 days. Fine, Aizawa said. He turned back to the board. The bell rang. Usually, the end of class was a cacophony of chatter. Now, it was a subdued shuffling of bags. The students filed out like a funeral procession. Ochako Uraraka was the last to leave. She paused by desk 18. Her hand hovered over the back of the chair, trembling slightly. She didn't touch it. She pulled her hand back, clenched it into a fist, and walked out. She didn't look back. The door slid shut. The room was empty, save for the dust and the ghosts. The weight of gravity. Jim Gamma was freezing. The heating units hadn't kicked in fully yet, but Ochako didn't care. She was sweating. Again. She shouted at the holographic drone. The drone beeped and fired a rubber bullet. Ochako didn't dodge. She stepped into the line of fire, grabbed the projectile out of the air, touched it, 0 gravity, and spun. She used the momentum to hurl the bullet back at twice the speed. It shattered the drone's sensor array. Again. 3 more drones activated. Uraraka, that's enough, a voice called out. Tsuyu Azuri stood at the entrance of the gym. She was holding 2 water bottles. Her large eyes were filled with worry. You've been in here for 4 hours. You missed lunch. I'm not hungry, Ochako said. She didn't look at Tsuyu. She stared at her hands. Her fingertips were raw, the pads blistered from overuse of her quirk. Ochako, please, Tsuyu said, walking over. Mr. Aizawa said we need to rest. The patrol exams are next week. I can't rest, Ochako whispered. She looked up. Her face, usually so round and cheerful, was drawn. Her eyes were hard. The bubbly girl who wanted to save people for money, for her parents, for smiles, she was gone. In her place was someone who had seen the sky fall. If I rest, Ochako said, her voice shaking, I think about the weight. The weight? The mountain, Ochako said. She looked at the ceiling of the gym. Do you know how heavy a mountain is, Tsu? It's millions of tons. Millions. She held up her hands. They looked so small. I can lift anything, she said, a hysterical edge creeping into her voice. That's my quirk. I make things light. I defy gravity. But I wasn't there. I was evacuating. I was useless. You weren't useless, Tsuyu said firmly. We followed orders. We survived. He didn't, Ochako snapped. The words hung in the air. Ochako flinched, as if she had slapped herself. She wrapped her arms around her stomach. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell. It's okay, Ribbit, Tsuyu said softly. She reached out and hugged her friend. Ochako stood stiffly for a moment, then crumbled. She didn't sob. She just leaned her forehead against Tsuyu's shoulder and breathed, ragged, shuddering breaths. I tried to float it, she whispered. In my dreams. Every night. I run back. I touch the rocks. I touch the whole mountain. I scream release. But it never moves. He's always crushed. Every single night. Tsuyu rubbed her back. We all have the dreams, Ochako. He liked my smile, Ochako said, a tear finally leaking out. He said he wanted to be a hero who saves everyone with a smile. Like All Might. She pulled back. She wiped her face. Her expression hardened again. It wasn't a smile. It was a grimace of determination. I'm going to get stronger, Ochako said. I'm going to be so strong that I never have to let go of anyone ever again. She turned back to the drones. Set level to hard, she commanded. Tsuyu watched her for a moment, then left the water bottle on the bench and walked away. There was nothing she could say. They were all drowning, and swimming harder was the only way to keep their heads above the water. The broken symbol. The teacher's lounge was usually a place of respite. Now, it felt like a bunker. All Might sat on the sofa. He was in his skeletal form, wearing a suit that hung loosely on his frame. A cup of tea sat on the table in front of him, cold and untouched. He was staring at his phone. The screen displayed a photo taken 6 months ago. It was him and young Midoriya, eating lunch on a bench. Midoriya was laughing, rice on his cheek. All Might was grinning. Toshinori Yagi rubbed his chest, right over the scar where his lung used to be. But the pain wasn't there. The pain was lower. Deeper. Toshinori, Midnight's voice was gentle. You need to eat. He looked up. Namuri Kayama was looking at him with pity. He hated it. He deserved judgment, not pity. I am not hungry, he rasped. The commission is asking for a statement, President Mike said from his desk. He wasn't shouting. He was wearing his reading glasses, rubbing his temples. The approval ratings are tanking, Toshi. The public, they feel it. The void, All Might repeated. Endeavor is trying, Mike said. He's working 20-hour shifts. He's catching villains left and right. But it's not sticking. The people are scared. They know Garaki is gone, they know Shigaraki is in hiding, but they also know. They know the future is dead, All Might finished. Don't say that, Midnight said sharply. We have 20 other students in that class. We have Togata. Mirio is a fine hero, All Might said. He is bright. He is strong. But, he looked back at the phone. He felt the one for all embers inside him. They were cold ashes now. He had burned the last of them. But he still felt the connection to the quirk, or at least, the memory of it. For the first few weeks, he had felt a pulling sensation. A phantom tug in his soul. He had told himself it was Izuku fighting. He had begged the rescue teams to dig faster. Then, the broadcast. The flat line, and the tugging stopped. The vestige world was silent. His master, Nana, was silent. I killed him, All Might whispered. Toshinori, stop. Aizawa entered the room. He slammed a stack of papers on his desk. We have been over this. The mission was a trap. The structural collapse was a failsafe. You were on the perimeter dealing with the near Hyans. You couldn't have reached him. I chose him, All Might said, his eyes watering. I brought him into this world of blood and violence. He was a quirkless boy with a happy life. I gave him a burden that crushed him. He was a hero, Aizawa said firmly. He made the choice to stay. He saved Bakugo and Todoroki. He saved me. Don't insult his sacrifice by calling it your mistake. All Might looked at Aizawa. He saw the grief behind the Erasure hero's stoic mask. Who takes his place, Shota? All Might asked. Who carries the torch? Bakugo? He is drowning in guilt. Todoroki? He is fighting his father's legacy. Who? We don't need a symbol right now, Aizawa said, pouring himself coffee. We need soldiers. We need to clear the mess. The mess, All Might chuckled humorlessly. Yes. The mess. The door opened. Principal Niza walked in. The small mammal looked serious. We have a situation, Niza said. Villains? Mike asked. Reports, Niza said, climbing onto a chair. From the Gunga Mountain exclusion zone. The room went icy still. What kind of reports? Aizawa asked. The police cordon has been breached multiple times by looters and villains looking for Garaki's tech, Nizu explained. Usually, the police catch them. But recently, the police are finding them already neutralized. Neutralized? All Might sat up. Beaten, Nizu corrected. Brutally. Bones broken. Concussions. Tied up with industrial cables or other materials. Left at the edge of the safe zone. Vigilantes? Midnight asked. Perhaps, Niza said. But the survivors, the villains who can still speak, they tell stories. They talk about a ghost. A ghost, Aizawa scoffed. Mass hysteria. They say, Niza continued, his black eyes fixed on All Might, that the ghost moves like lightning. Green lightning. The teacup fell from the table. It shattered on the floor. All Might stood up, trembling. Green? It is likely a coincidence, Nisa said quickly, raising a paw. A villain with an electric quirk. Or a visualization quirk. The area is heavily irradiated with quirk factors from the destroyed labs. Hallucinations are common. But what if? All Might stepped forward. What if he's alive? Tashinori Aizawa said, his voice warning. The sensors confirmed it. Total biological cessation. The mountain fell on him. He had no food. No water. It's been 3 months. I have to go, All Might said. He moved toward the door. You will do no such thing, Nisa said sharply. You are retired. You are frail. The exclusion zone is a hazardous environment filled with feral nomu and toxic gas. Then send someone. All Might roared. Send the team. Investigate the ghost. We are, Nisa said calmly. The HPSC has authorized a cleanup and reconnaissance mission. They want to secure the area and dispel the rumors before they cause panic. They believe a villain is using the ruins as a base and mocking the dead. Who is going? Aizawa asked. Endeavor. Hawks, Nisa said. And they requested a student squad. For experience. And for optics. To show the next generation is ready to reclaim the lost ground. Class 1A, Aizawa realized. Specifically, Nisa nodded Bakugo, Todoroki, Kirishima, and Yayorosa. The ones who were there. Bakugo can't go, Aizawa said immediately. He's unstable. He needs closure, Shota, Midnight argued. He's stuck. Maybe seeing the reality, maybe finding the villain mocking his friend's memory, will help him move on. Aizawa looked at the shattered teacup on the floor. If he sees a ghost with green lightning, Aizawa murmured, it won't give him closure. It will break him. Or, All Might whispered, a tiny, dangerous spark of hope igniting in his chest, it will save him. The dorms, night, Katsuki Bakugo couldn't sleep. This wasn't new. He hadn't slept through the night since the raid. He sat on the floor of his room. The lights were off. The only illumination came from the streetlights outside. In front of him, leaning against the wall, was the All Might trading card. The card. The one Deku had bought for him when they were kids. The one that was bent in the corner. You idiot, Bakugo whispered to the card. He hated the silence of the dorms. He hated how everyone tiptoed around him. Don't upset Bakugo. Bakugo is grieving. He wasn't grieving. Grieving was for people who accepted death. He was angry. He was angry at the villains. He was angry at the heroes. He was angry at Aizawa for dragging him away. He was angry at himself for being weak. But mostly, he was angry at Deku. You promised, Bakugo hissed, his hands shaking. You said you'd surpass me? You said I am here. You don't get to be here and then just leave. He remembered the look in Deku's eye. The green eye through the torn mask. Cack and go. It wasn't fear. It was acceptance. It was the look of someone who had already done the math and realized he was the remainder. Self-sacrificing moron, Bakugo spat. He stood up and paced the room. His quirk popped against his palms, tiny, agitated sparks. Pup pup pup. He needed to hit something. But if he went to the gym, Aizawa would give him that look. The I'm worried about you look. He hated that look. A knock at the door. Go away, Bakugo growled. It's me, Kirishima's voice came through. I brought, spicy curry. Sato made too much. I'm not hungry. Bakugo, open up. Please. Bakugo stared at the door. He wanted to blast it off its hinges. Instead, he walked over and yanked it open. Kirishima stood there holding a bowl. He looked tired. His hair wasn't spiked up, it was down, flat against his head. It made him look younger. Vulnerable. What? Bakugo snapped. Can I come in? Bakugo stepped aside. Kirishima walked in and set the bowl on the desk. He saw the card on the floor. He didn't comment on it. Aizawa-sensei told us, Kirishima said quietly. Told us what? About the mission. The recon mission to Gunga. Bakugo froze. What? The commission authorized a sweep. To clear out the scavengers. Rumors of a ghost or something. Kirishima looked at Bakugo. We're on the list, man. Me, you, Todoroki, Yamamo. Bakugo felt a rushing sound in his ears. We're going back? Yeah. Kirishima sat on the bed. Aizawa tried to cut you. Said you weren't ready? I'll kill him, Bakugo snarled instinctively. He was protecting you, Kirishima said. But All Might. All Might insisted. He said you needed to go. Bakugo looked at his hands. Going back. To the grave. Are you gonna be okay? Kirishima asked. If we go there, we're gonna see it. The rubble. Where I'm going, Bakugo said. His voice was low, deadly quiet. Bakugo. I'm going, Bakugo repeated, looking up. His red eyes burned with a ferocity Kirishima hadn't seen in months. And if there's a villain there, if there's someone pretending to be him, pretending to be a ghost, he clenched his fist. A larger explosion popped, singeing the air. I will turn them into dust. The mission briefing. 2 days later. The staging area near the perimeter of the Gunga Mountain exclusion zone. The landscape had changed. What was once a lush, forested mountain range was now a jagged scar on the earth. The collapse had created a massive depression, a crater filled with unstable scree and twisted metal. Nature had begun to reclaim it, weeds sprouting through the concrete, snow covering the char marks. But it still looked like a wound. Endeavor stood at the head of the command tent. Hawks was leaning against a support pole, eating a nutrient bar, his wings twitching against the cold wind. Class 1A the selected squad stood in formation. They wore their winter costumes. Bakugo's gauntlets were polished to a mirror shine. He vibrated with tension. Todoroki was impassive, his breath misting in the air. Kirishima looked nervous. Yayorozu was checking her equipment belt for the 10th time. Listen up, Endeavor barked. The objective is simple. Survey and secure. He pointed to a holographic map of the ruins. The upper levels are collapsed. However, seismic scans indicate pocket voids in the mid-levels, sectors 3 through 6. This is where the villains are hiding. They are looting quirk-suppressant tech and high-grade materials. What about the ghost? Bakugo asked. He didn't raise his hand. Endeavor frowned. The ghost is likely a PLF remnant using fear tactics to monopolize the loot. Your job is not to engage alone. We move in squads. Squad Alpha, me and Brennan. Squad Beta, Hawks and Tokoyami who had been added for aerial recon. Squad Gamma, you students, under the supervision of Eraserhead. Aizawa stepped forward. He looked even more tired in the natural light. Stay close, Aizawa said. Do not wander off. This structure is unstable. One wrong step, and you fall into a pit that drops 100 meters. And the gas pockets are real. Keep your respirators on standby. We're checking the main vent shaft, Aizawa continued, pointing to a specific grid. That's where the thermal signature of the ghost was last reported. Bakugo stared at the map. The vent shaft. That was it. That was where they had escaped. That was where he had looked back. Let's get this over with, Bakugo muttered, pulling his mask up. Move out! Endeavor commanded. Into the dark. The descent was eerie. They rappelled down a stable service shaft that led to Sector 3. As soon as they passed the threshold of daylight, the temperature dropped. The air smelled of rust, mold, and something sweet, like ozone. Flashlights, Aizawa ordered. Beams of light cut through the gloom. The destruction was absolute. Walls were buckled, floors were tilted at crazy angles. It was like walking inside the skeleton of a crushed giant. It's quiet, Kirishima whispered, hardening his arms. Too quiet. Don't jinx it, shitty hair, Bakugo growled, scanning the corners. They walked for 20 minutes. They found signs of life, empty food wrappers, a discarded battery pack. Someone has been living here, Yayorozu noted, crouching to examine a footprint in the dust. Recently. This mud is fresh. Villains, Todoroki said. Wait, Hawk's voice came over the comms. Squad Gamma, hold position. I'm picking up something on the feather sensors. What is it? Aizawa asked, hand on his capture weapon. Heartbeats, Hawks said. A lot of them. Ahead of you. The old cafeteria level. Ambush? Maybe. But they're erratic. Fast. Nomu, Endeavor's voice cut in. Hyents? No, Hawks said. Too small. But there are dozens. Prepare for combat, Aizawa ordered. Formation B. Kirishima, point. Bakugo, Todoroki, flank. Yayorozu, rear guard. I'll take high ground. They moved into the cafeteria. It was a massive cavern, shadows stretching everywhere. Suddenly, a giggle echoed through the hall. Hee hee hee. What the hell was that? Kirishima asked. From the shadows, eyes appeared. Glowing yellow eyes. Laughers. Aizawa identified them instantly. Pack hunters. Watch your legs. The shadows erupted. The fight was chaotic. The Nomas swarmed over the debris, moving with terrifying speed. Die! Bakugo screamed, blasting a Noma in the face. The explosion illuminated the room in a harsh orange glare. Todoroki unleashed a wave of ice, freezing 3 of them, but more poured from the vents. There's too many! Yayorozu yelled, creating a cannon to fire a net. Focus fire! Aizawa shouted, erasing the quirks of the lead attackers, causing them to stumble. They were winning, but it was messy. The students were skilled, but they were emotionally compromised. They were fighting on the grave of their friend. Bakugo was fighting like a berserker. He wasn't coordinating. He was chasing kills. Bakugo! Get back in formation! Aizawa yelled. Shut up! Bakugo roared, launching himself into the air to intercept a leaping Nomu. I'll kill every single one of them. He blasted the Nomu, but the recoil knocked him backward, straight into a weakened section of the floor. Bakugo! Kirishima reached out. Crack! The floor gave way. Bakugo fell. He didn't scream. He just looked up, his eyes wide, as the light of the flashlights receded. He fell into the darkness below. The ghost territory. Bakugo hit the ground hard. He groaned, rolling over. His training took over. Assess damage. Rib sore. Head ringing. But alive. He stood up. It was pitch black. Damn it, he hissed. He sparked a small explosion in his palm to create light. He was in a lower level. Sector 5, maybe? The air here was colder. Eraser. Icy hot. He yelled into his comms. Static. Piece of junk, he muttered. He started to walk. He needed to find a ramp up. He heard a noise. Not a giggle. A shuffle. He spun around, raising his gauntlet. Who's there? Out of the shadows, 3 figures emerged. They weren't Noma. They were men. Villains. They wore scavenged gear, pipes in their hands. They looked rough, desperate. Well, one of them sneered. He had a mutation quirk, spikes on his shoulders. A little hero fell from the sky. Fresh meat, another said. Look at those gauntlets. Those are worth a fortune. Get out of my way, Bakugo growled. I'm in a bad mood. He's in a bad mood, the spiked villain laughed. We've been eating rats for 3 months, kid. We're in a worse mood. They lunged. Bakugo grinned. This was what he wanted. Something to hurt. Die. He unleashed a massive explosion. But the villains were experienced. The spiked one had a hardening quirk similar to Kirishima's but uglier. He tanked the blast. The other 2 flanked him. One shot a glob of sticky slime that caught Bakugo's left arm, gluing it to his side. What? Gotcha! The slime villain pulled, unbalancing Bakugo. The spiked villain swung a heavy steel pipe. Bakugo dodged, but the pipe clipped his ear, sending blood flying. He stumbled back. Damn it! I'm sloppy. Too angry, he readied his right hand for a howitzer impact. He was going to bring the whole ceiling down if he had to. Say goodnight, hero. The villain raised the pipe for a killing blow. Suddenly, the air pressure changed. Zzzzzt. A sound like a high-voltage wire snapping. Green light flooded the corridor. Not the orange of fire. Green. A black tendril shot out from the ceiling darkness. It moved faster than the eye could follow. It wrapped around the spiked villain's neck. Snap. The villain was yanked upward into the dark. He didn't even scream. The other 2 villains froze. What? Thud. A figure landed between Bakugo and the villains. Bakugo froze. His breath caught in his throat. The figure was crouched on one knee. It was wearing a tattered, filthy green suit. A white fur coat, stained and matted, was draped over its shoulders like a warlord's cloak. The figure stood up. Slowly, it wore a metal respirator mask. The hood was up, casting the face in shadow. But on top of the hood, 2 long, torn scraps of fabric stood up. Like rabbit ears. Green lightning crackled around the figure. It wasn't the soft, oscillating light Bakugo remembered. It was jagged. Violent. It scarred the concrete beneath the iron boots. The slime villain trembled. The ghost. The ghost didn't speak. He turned his head. Glowing green eyes stared from the darkness of the hood. They locked onto the villains. The villains dropped their weapons. They turned to run. The ghost raised a hand. Black whip exploded outward. Not one strand. Dozens. It looked like a black spiderweb consuming the hallway. It caught the villains. It slammed them into the walls. Hard. Bones snapped. The villains slumped to the ground, unconscious. Silence returned to the hallway. Bakugo stood there, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He forgot the pain in his head. He forgot the slime on his arm. He stared at the back of the white coat. Deku? He whispered. The word was so quiet it barely existed. The figure stiffened. The green lightning flickered, then stabilized. The ghost turned around slowly. He looked at Bakugo. For a second, Bakugo expected a smile. He expected the nervous, stuttering, "Kakin, are you okay?" But the eyes behind the mask were cold. They were assessing. Calculating. They looked at Bakugo not as a friend, but as a variable. The ghost tilted his head slightly. Then, without a word, he shot a black tendril at the ceiling and launched himself upward, vanishing into the shadows. "Wait!" Bakugo screamed. He ignited his palm and blasted himself upward, chasing the green light. "DKU! Wait! It's me!" He reached the upper level. Empty. Just the dust settling, and a scrap of green cloth caught on a piece of rebar. Bakugo landed. He walked over to the cloth. He pulled it free. It was burnt. It was dirty. But it was unmistakably the material of the Gamma suit. Bakugo clutched the cloth in his fist. He fell to his knees. He didn't cry. He started to laugh. A choked, hysterical sound. "You bastard," Bakugo whispered, a grin stretching across his face that was equal parts relief and pure, unadulterated fury. "You're not a ghost." He stood up, crushing the cloth. "You're just hiding." He looked into the dark. "I found you.